Hi, my name is Kim, and I just wanted to share my experience as a survivor. I have been through a number of different traumatic experiences in my life, and I've really come through all of it. And I just wanted to share how I did that and what the different struggles have been like, and encourage others to know that there is another side. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. My first experience with sexual assault, I was about 8 or 9. And I didn't know what it was, but I remember very clearly what occurred. And honestly, I got angry and I fought and I kicked and I said no and I got away. And I, in my little child's mind, thought, okay, I took care of that. I didn't know and have the words to say what he had done to me. But I did feel like it was taken care of. And of course, I didn't know to tell anybody what was going on. As an adult looking back, I see the signs, ways that my behavior changed, that I, as a child could not have ever known. Things like bedwetting, just a different understanding of how people interact, and definitely a change in my confidence. So it's not really surprising then that as I grew up, I had difficulty in relationships, and I ended up getting married to my college boyfriend, and I didn't see any signs that he was going to be an abusive husband. And that's very typical. He was the classic wolf in sheep's clothing. He started verbally abusing me, threatening me, would trap me in the bathroom, physical things, things while I was sleeping, things, to my animals, and, things that made no sense. And yet, while I was in that moment, I was trying to make things work. Very few people believed me that anything was wrong when I finally became brave enough to say that he was hurting me. And it really had to escalate to the point where I was physically being hurt before I could even look at the situation and say, I can't deny this. And I did get out of it. I moved out, moved back in, tried to make things work, got to the point where I realized I'm not going to be safe. If I sacrifice and try to make this work, I will not be able to have the life that I want. I knew I'd not be able to have kids in that scenario, and thankfully we didn't have any. And I was able to get out of that situation. I was so afraid of him, though, that I moved across the country from Iowa to the Washington, D.C. area, and I was getting started over again out there. I was very scared because my bathroom didn't have a working lock. So of course this is an example of the PTSD that I started to experience. I was alone living in that apartment. There was not any reason really for me to be afraid that somebody would come into the bathroom. But of course, because I had been trapped in a bathroom, I had been hurt in a bathroom, there was part of me that needed that. I didn't really understand that I had PTSD from those experiences until I had gotten into another relationship with somebody that I was already friends with. I couldn't understand very well the normal interactions of a relationship. I think there were times when I was seeing things and feeling things through a filter of abuse and pain, and the person that I was with was not that way. Now, in time, I realized that we were kind of in different places. And so I started to see that the relationship wasn't maybe gonna work. And a big part of that was because, unfortunately, he became clear that he was an alcoholic. And even though he was very jovial and friendly and fun, it was more of a, he's still in that college mentality, and I, need stability and want to settle down and want to feel secure. I did what most people do when they've experienced abuse and it's been tied to a relationship or even childhood. I lashed in at myself. Because of course I thought it was my fault, like, oh, well, I'm so unlovable, I must be causing this. And I started taking the anxiety medicine that I was taking more frequently than I should have. And I started abusing it, and it was actually just a couple of instances, but I just remember feeling such overwhelming pain. I ended up in a psychiatric ward at a nearby hospital because I had taken something like 13 Xanax and just fell asleep, and I had absolutely no interest in harming myself. I know very well that at the time I was trying to sleep and I was trying to escape, what I was feeling. And it was after that experience that I first saw a doctor that discussed PTSD with me, and I immediately knew, yes, that sounds exactly like what I'm going through. I actually moved out of the house that I was in with the man I was dating and our roommates to a different little village nearby in upstate New York. And I was just renting a house and working remotely for a company in Washington, D.C. And suddenly, after being there a few months, I was getting out of the bathtub, and I looked up and I saw a man's face in my window. And my first instinct was I just pounded on the window. The guy stayed there, and I screamed. Like, I let out a blood-curdling scream. I'm trying to cover my body. Actually, the man I had been dating happened to be there, and he came in, and I explained in my panicked voice, and he went running out. Couldn't find anybody. We called the police, and they discovered fingerprints on all of my outside windows. Weeks followed, and I started to find items moved below my windows. Like my patio chairs were moved below my windows. He was still trying to see in, and I had covered extra by that point all the windows, right? Something like 6 months passed, and I was in my bathtub, just soaking, and I heard this loud bang, just a slam. And I paused for a second, and then adrenaline kicked in, and I just jumped up, and I was like, I have to get out of here, because I thought somebody was there. So I went, I somehow covered myself and went out to the front porch where it was more lighted, and I called the police. And they were driving by my house regularly, but I had heard no progress, and I'm pretty proactive at things, so I hadn't heard anything. Anyway, a policeman came by, and what we discovered was, yes, they found more fingerprints, but the first incident had basically occurred over the winter, and this is upstate New York, so there was quite a bit of snow. Well, I had a cellar. He had been going down into my cellar. The bang I heard was apparently that wooden panel slamming down, which I had no idea was not locked. So it felt like he had watched me get into the bathtub and then basically didn't care that the door slammed. Then I mentioned to my landlord, I'm moving out, getting out of here, arranged for the movers. I found out a woman that lived in that house before me was assaulted in the house. So, yeah. You can only imagine the triggers that somebody would have after an experience like that. At this point, I had already been through abuse, domestic violence. I'd had my life threatened. I moved across the country to get away from my ex-husband. And then I was in this situation. What ended up happening is in the years following, I had moved back to DC. Before I met my husband, Chris, I was raped for the first time. This was when I was working in Washington, D.C., and I was at a work event, and not really drinking, but somebody did drug me, and I ended up in a hotel where I was raped. And to be honest, because of the use of drugs, I did know what happened, but I could only remember flashes, right? And actually some of that is filled out in time. But it was a situation where I did not know the person's name. I did not know what hotel I was at. I didn't have, the ability to know that because I was, catatonic. The next morning, I remember I went back to my apartment. I had to metro back up to Maryland, and I honestly didn't process any of it. I went on with my life. I did not face it. I literally changed clothes, showered, and went back to the conference and just avoided that person. That was another experience that, to be honest, I did not share that with anybody. I was already living with my current husband years later before I finally ever said that had happened. And I will say that it also took me years to discuss it with a therapist. I decided in my mind, this is not going to affect me, And I kept telling myself, well, I don't remember it much, so it's kind of like it didn't happen. But that's just really not true. You will have to address everything. So it does take time. You can't say, well, okay, this happened, I'm going to work on it, it's great if you can do that, but that doesn't mean that your mind and your body is going to just go along with that. It might take 5, 6, 7, 10, we don't really know, but I will say that in looking back at that experience now, I can talk about it, and I'm not falling apart. I'm not going to have nightmares about it. And I did for years. I had night terrors. That was one of my most difficult PTSD symptoms, was sleep. But again, you can get to the other side of these to the point where you can speak intelligently about it. And I'm wanting to share that so people understand, yes, this horrible thing happened, but I am still here. In effect, I feel like I have won because look at me, I'm strong enough now where I can say that did not shape me to the point where I am broken. You might feel that way in the moment. Of course you will. That's okay. If you can just fight through it, reach out, you can find the other side. What ended up happening after that is we moved back to Iowa, and we had the goal of starting a family. And so in the years to follow, I faced other difficulties. Unfortunately, my husband was diagnosed with leukemia about 5 or 6 years ago. And in the year leading up to that diagnosis, I lost my second pregnancy. And then the first time I left the house after having the procedure where that unborn baby was removed, I was drugged and raped again. And it was at a friend's house during her birthday party here in Iowa. And it was kind of the same situation where nobody understood, nobody believed me. I lost that friend who had that birthday party. She did not believe what I experienced and what happened to me. Now, because I had been through that before, I recognized what happened right away. I was very emotional, and I had the whatever drug in my system. I told my husband something happened, and we did go to the hospital, and an advocate from Riverview came and sat with me. And I think my husband couldn't be in there, but they were with me when I had the rape kit. And, I just have to say, and I think a lot of people will understand this, but there's not any way that if you haven't been through it that you can really get it. People talk about rape kit and you might hear it on TV or a crime show. I can't tell you how traumatizing going through that is in itself. I just, if you've been through that, I just have to say in this moment that I'm sorry, I understand, and I hear you, I see you, and I believe you, and you're not alone. And I mean, we really do, as survivors, need to be there for each other and speak about things like this. There's not any way I could have known in my life how difficult something like that was going to be. I didn't have one the first time I was raped. That's one of the reasons why having someone with me was so helpful, because that was horrifying, I just have to say. And then after that experience, it was just a few months later, the summer following, I lost another pregnancy. And my husband then in September was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. And what this is all coming to is a point where I really hit probably the most difficult time in my life. I had all of these different experiences, and honestly, I did a lot of work. I credit those doctors in Washington, D.C. with saving my life. But after the year, again, this was about 5 or 6 years ago, when these multiple traumas just kind of all came up. And then I had to stay strong, and I had my daughter. My husband was in the hospital. He had a stem cell transplant. All these things were happening in the span of a year and a half. I got to the point where I was self-harming. I found some syringes that had been left behind when my husband was in the hospital. I just started stabbing my arm with a needle. Nobody could see it. I felt like I had so much inside of me. I really gave it no thought whatsoever. I didn't tell anybody. It did evolve, though, into cutting. Eventually, I had to face it. I broke down. I was still, being a mom, and I was still helping my husband, but otherwise I really couldn't function. I was having trouble eating and sleeping, and I was harming myself, and I had no interest in ending my life. I had absolutely no interest. It was, this is too much. I think of it this way now that I have some distance from it all. I hated myself because I lost those pregnancies. I grew up and I experienced relationships where I was more comfortable with punishment and anger and thinking bad things about myself than I was with positive things. And I see things through that filter, so that is what came out of that experience. And I will say that I went into partial hospitalization to work through that because I really did want to stop. I didn't want my daughter to ever know that I went through that. I didn't want to have scars on my body that I caused. I didn't want to ever have to say to somebody, yeah, I get what that is. I have been there. And I worked so hard against those negative thoughts. And I mean like writing them down, challenging them. I went through and I did the work. And there are great resources out there for people struggling with these things. So I know that's a lot, and I don't want people to think, oh my gosh, like, wow, I can't believe you've been through all this. I hate to say it, but not any of the things I've been through are really that uncommon. I do have some ways that I've coped that I'd like to share, and they're just small little things that helped me. First, I want to say, reach out to a professional. For many years, I kept a crisis line in my phone, just under somebody else's name. It is so hard to reach out in those moments where you're you know that you're wallowing in these negative thoughts, or you can't escape a memory. But put it in your phone and just try and click that button, or try and send a text to that group. Really, if you're struggling with trauma or grief, I strongly recommend that one of the first things you do is control what's going into your mind. So social media, television. I developed a rule for myself that was after 5, it's all rainbows and ponies. Like, I am not watching SVU. I am gonna watch Shark Tank, or I'm gonna watch some show on HGTV or Chopped. Something that is a relaxing break from the day. Because of my sleep problems with nightmares and insomnia from trauma, I have to protect my sleep as best as I can. So those hours before winding down, I don't let anything in. The other thing is, and this is just a very small little tactic I had, but when I was really paralyzed by some of the trauma, and I mean like laying on the floor of my apartment in the days when I was just figuring out, after the first rape, before I met my husband, I was paralyzed. I struggled so much with everything, eating, taking a shower, everything. What I started doing is I tried to gamify it a little for myself. So I would find like a coffee can, and I'd take like 3 little bitty slips of paper, and I would just pick 3 things that I wanted to try and do. And the thing is, I kept them very small, very small. I mean, sometimes I'd take a shower on there, or maybe all the time I had it on there. And then sometimes it'd just be, I'm gonna clean the cat litter, or I'm gonna wipe off the kitchen counter, or I'm gonna make myself a cup of tea. And then I would I'd put them all in there, I'd draw one out. Oh, it's clean the mirror. Okay, all right, Kim, like I can do that. And even if I just got that done, it made me feel like I could function, like I was not paralyzed or broken, and like I was trying to take control. This might sound extreme, but this is so important, because if you've ever been hurt like this, you know how hard it is to be vulnerable and taking a bath or a shower, even if you're alone. There have been a lot of times in my life where I simply could not do it. And it was hard. It's just true that if you are clean, you do feel a little better, right? But it's very hard and it's very scary. So I would say, you know what? It is okay. There have been times in my life where I've put my hair in a bun and I have used wipes. Just buy some wipes. Nobody has to know. It's okay. If you can't get in the shower that day, or maybe you can wash part of your body, that's great. But there were times I couldn't even do that. I felt that way. But if I could just get to the point where I was like, no, it's not ideal, but if I can just wipe that mirror off, or if I can just even use this wipe, I'm not going to feel so gross. It's a step, You can take little steps. You don't have to take big steps. You can take very small steps. You don't have to take them alone. I'll help you. Riverview will help you. Other people will help you. I can't walk that walk with you, but I can hold your hand. And I can say, this is what I found helped me. And I'm not going to ever be totally rid of everything, but I'm out there trying to live my life and not let these things change me, so that I still feel, I still have empathy. And I know confidently, I can say, yeah, I've been through these things, and it's okay. I accept that they've made me who I am, but I still love who I am. And you can definitely get there too. It's so important that an organization like Riverview is here, because if I had been going through these things here in this area, I would have sought help in the instance where I didn't know the person that hurt me. I would have felt heard, you know? So when you're in this situation and there is somebody there to hold your hand who you didn't know. They just showed up because they found out this is why you're at the hospital. And there is an organization that listens, that knows, that you don't have to tell your story because they are aware and recognize this is something that is serious and that needs to be addressed in the community. So the reason why I want to share my story now, there are several reasons. I've been wanting to for a long time, and one of the ways that I privately have coped, along with some other survivors, is I do write poetry. And I have been feeling like I'm ready to share it. But the other thing is, in the last year, some things have happened in my life that make me feel less willing to hide. First of all, I'm confident. I really do feel like I can speak about these things and maybe help people, and it's not going to hurt me in any way. Something happened to someone else that I love. It was sexual assault, and I felt like enough. I cannot keep quiet anymore. This is it. This is the final straw. If I couldn't help this person, or I couldn't stop this person from being hurt, then I am just done. I'm going to tell people what I've been through and how I've made it through, and I'm going to help them. One of the reasons why that experience also maybe wasn't as traumatizing as people might expect is that I can help them through it. I can help that person through. I can help other people through because I've been through it. And I don't want anybody to feel like they're alone, It's so easy for people to stay quiet about this. And it's not easy to talk about. It makes sense. Nobody really wants to say I was hurt and this is what happened, But the other thing is, as I've told you, I'm a COVID long hauler, and I've been recovering for 13 months now. And I really did think on numerous occasions that I was, for whatever reason, just not going to make it, right? I had a lot of nerve pain. I had a lot of brain fog. There was something going on with my heart rate. When you don't know what's going on with your body, and I don't really have physical illness as something I've experienced much in my life, you feel like what is wrong, and you feel like I could die at any minute, especially, I did have some respiratory symptoms early on, and that was really scary. So I think just going through that, I was like, you know what, if I am gonna die, I want to be heard first. I'm frankly okay with it. I know it's going to happen one day. But if there's anything I can speak about and share and help people with, I think it's this. So enough holding back. I'm just going to say it. And I'm not afraid. I just want to try and help other people.